running a lot of the workshops as the delivery partner for the Mayor's Entrepreneur Award over the last 4 months, and really enjoying getting to know you guys and learning more about the fantastic ideas that you've been developing. So this afternoon is our opportunity to have a think about the application, which is coming up. Over the last 6 years, I probably reviewed something like 11 or 1200 business plans, um, while running various startup programs and accelerators. And so I have seen a lot of these, and I thought it was really worth using this time to really think about how you stand out, because it is there are going to be lots of applicants, and hopefully at the end of the session you'll have a better sort of idea about how to stand out. The way it's going to work is I'm going to do some talking for maybe 20 minutes, and I'm going to stop intermittently to look at some of the questions that come through in the chat. So please this is the time to ask those questions, so please do send them through. I've also read all of the startup ideas that you included when you registered for this workshop. So if it's okay, I'm going to pull out a few of those for us to have a look at. If any of you, would prefer for your idea not to be shared in the space, please do let me know. They will all be anonymized. I'll remove the name of the business. There'll be no kind of applicant name against them. But I think it's, just good to kind of give, share some feedback within this group. And I'm also going to walk you through some case studies of what I see as good and bad practice in applications. And by the end of the first part of this session, we should have actually gone through all of the sections to some degree of detail that you will be completing in the application. And then at the end of today, we are super happy that we actually have 2 of last year's winners coming in for a Q&A, and they're going to be sharing some of their experiences and also some top tips on how to nail this application. Okay, so just going to share my screen. Okay, so today is all about nailing your application. And we'll cover the application, some top tips, some case studies, and Q&A at the end of the session with some previous winners. So just quickly, for those of you who have not spent every waking moment of the last 3 months reading the Mayor's Entrepreneur website, this is some more about the competition. So it's really important to get into your head why this competition exists and what it sets out to achieve. And its aims are to find student business ideas to help deliver good growth for our city. So this is really specifically about London and investing in new ideas that can help make London a better place to live. So growth that makes London cleaner, greener, and ready for the future. And also the separate part of this program is to give everyone involved a set of skills that you can take forward into the future, whatever that might hold for you. So
hi Ed, sorry, it's still showing loading on your slides. Oh, there we go. Stuff's happening now.
Okay.
I think we now have click to exit full screen. Oh no. Now have a white screen.
Okay.
It might still be booting up.
How about
there
now?
we go. Yes, now we have slides.
I don't know why it does this. Every time I press present, it doesn't show my screen. Anyway, you can see. No worries. So yeah, really thinking about how to contextualize your idea kind of under, the umbrella of this competition and making it London specific. And then next, to think about the award categories. So each of you will be applying for a specific award category, which are the Environment Award, Smart Cities Award, Creative Industries Award, and the Health Award. And in previous years, this has been quite a common question from applicants asking which award they are best suited for. So if you have any questions about that, maybe you can drop a question into the chat with a quick description of what your idea is, and then we can look to address those awards either today or in the follow-up mentoring that we're going to be sharing the link for towards the end of the session. But first of all, a question for you all. When is the application deadline? '18th. Okay. Marcia, you have 3 more days than you thought. It is the 18th of April. So it is coming up, but that still gives you plenty of time to work on your application and ideally go through a whole bunch of iterations. And I wanted to start this whole session with one key point. And so if you leave today remembering only one thing, it is this: that the key to a great application is to think about this question: what makes people say, "Tell me more"? So maybe in the chat, you can write a few ideas about what makes people say, "Tell me more," whether you're pitching a startup, telling a story, giving a presentation. What are those factors that make people hungry to know more? So someone has said questions, how a solution can help that specific listener. Yes, so making it specific to the audience. Suspense, mystery. Absolutely. So some really good ideas about how to make your story really compelling. Often, very often in the applications that I read, people are not thinking about their audience. They are thinking about what they have obsessed about over the last weeks or months, and they plow in with a kind of diatribe to describe what they're doing. But you have to think about that audience and what will make them want to know more about the idea that you're presenting. And so here are a few suggestions to make that happen. So number one, as someone mentioned, surprise. So including statistics, statements, stories from your own personal experience that tell me something I didn't know or make me think differently. And later we're going to have a look at some examples of how you might do that. The second, start with why, which is almost always more engaging than what. So the benefits before the features. This is something that came up really often in the business ideas that you sent through in your registration for today. People were going straight into describing what they did. But in a few cases, people started with the reason for doing this. So, you know, across the UK, 27% of young people are facing mental health challenges which are stopping them engaging effectively in education and work. And that why suddenly hooks you into that story much more than saying, I'm building an app that, you know, creates a community around mental health for students. So thinking about that compelling opening statement to frame your idea really makes it more engaging. Next is about clarity. And this is one that I obsess with because often people put a whole bunch of detail using technical language and probably go on too much in their description Whereas just like with the best authors and writers, they are able to tell a story with real clarity using intelligible language. Next is evidence. So when I'm being told any story, I want to believe in the person telling me that story. And it's the same with entrepreneurs. So if you can back up your claims, i.e. your claim that your idea will be successful with evidence, then it just makes it more compelling. So you can say, for example, even if you don't yet have a product, over the last 2 months, I have researched with 200 people, and I know that 65% of them were looking for a better solution to address their mental health. Or over the last month, I have set up a landing page and I've already signed up 53 people to use my app once it's ready. And then lastly, to think about excitement. You want to inspire your audience. And the 3 things that you should think about in terms of excitement is to prove that what you're doing is novel. It is exciting. It is different in some way. It is indispensable, that it is addressing something that is vital. There is a big market need. And then lastly, that it is achievable, so that you have a clear plan for making this work. You've thought about how it's going to be built. You've thought about how you might use the funding to make that happen. You've thought about your revenue model, what team you might have around you. So those 3 points really help sell yourselves. And I like to use the analogy of a glass of water when you are pitching to a bunch of judges, whether in person or in an application form. Essentially, when you first meet them or they first read your application, they know nothing about you and they are like an empty glass of water, and you need to, in stages, fill it up so they are filled with confidence in you and your idea. And a few of these factors to help build that confidence: first of all, be relevant to the awards, as I've mentioned already. Second, to think about the originality of your idea. Third, to describe yourself and convey the idea with simplicity rather than complexity. Next, to think about the societal or environmental impact of what you're doing. So again, that it ties in with the awards. And then the commercialization. So what is your pathway to turn this opportunity into something that can be a sustainable business or non-profit organization? So here are the first 5 questions on the application form, and we're going to go in to have a little bit of a look at how you might address each of them, and then some examples of good and bad practice. So number 1, my business idea is. So my tips here is to be as clear as possible. What is your idea? Is it an app?
Ed, you've just gone muted.
Oh, I think someone muted me. It's not sure why that is. Anyway, you can hear me now, right?
Yep, you're all good.
Okay, cool. How much did you miss?
Literally half a sentence.
Oh, okay,
So
fine,
you're
fine.
good.
Okay, so the first example response to this question is this one. Carbon Z is a platform that tracks carbon emissions across the city. What do you guys think? Feedback on this idea. What do you like? What might be improved? Have in the chat, or yeah, unmute yourself, even better.
They could talk about the problem maybe first, even though it's quite an obvious problem, but or be a bit more specific.
Well, I actually don't think it's an obvious problem, because not everyone is like people on this call, and not everyone is thinking about carbon emissions in London, whether that's surprising or not. So, yes, talking
Should
about
the problem be in this section?
about who it's for.
Sorry, Ed, should the problem be in this section?
I think so. The next question is about the problem, where you can go into more detail. But you can, you know, bring this to life a little bit more by putting it into context. So you could say Carbon Z is a platform that helps people navigate through the city in a way that is that avoids the most polluting areas of the city using XYZ technologies and with these impacts. So suddenly you're bringing that business idea to life. So my feedback here is that it's not very specific. It is a platform. Does that mean it's an app? It's a website, and it doesn't really explain what it does. It tracks carbon emissions across the city. When I read this, it kind of makes me think, has this person just sat down one evening and come up with an idea? Or have they really thought about how this might work? So, you know, it could be that it says it is an app that uses publicly available data sets to track carbon emissions and create easy to use maps to help people navigate through London in a safe way. And then next, to solve the problem of what problem are you solving and how can you demonstrate that this is a big problem? So back to that point I made about being indispensable, using stats, research, and examples to bring the problem to life. So for those of you who are in the workshop 2 about customer discovery, this is where you can really talk about all of your insights about the problem that you've been looking at. What have you learned? Who have you spoken to? How have you brought to life the problem that you're solving? Another comment from the business ideas that I was reading this afternoon is to think about the two sides of the problem that you are solving. So, for example, let's say, you know, an idea might be we are training up people to be from minority groups to be music producers. So you are addressing a problem that is around access to a particular career, but you also need to think about some of the opportunities that you would be bringing to their clients. So it might be that you've understood something about, you know, a trend in the music industry around new ways to produce, new ways to distribute music, some of the marketing challenges facing the music industry at the moment. So look at both sides of the problem. Sometimes when you're building an impact business, you just try and think about the group that you are trying to have, you know, a social impact on, rather than also thinking about the challenges of the people who are going to pay for that service. And that is super important to think about both sides. So an example here, to solve the problem of London residents who are worried by the high pollution in the city. In some areas, pollution in London is 5 times the EU limit. What do we think about this answer? Do you want to unmute and share some comments? What could be improved about this answer?
The figures aren't really relatable. You don't have anything to go from.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think they could be more specific about what they're worried about or how the people are worried about. Like, is it lungs, or maybe it doesn't look very nice with like lots of smoke everywhere?
Really good. Yes, because, you know, we can worry about things in a navel gazing way and we talk about it over a drink in a restaurant, or we can think about the immediate impact it has to us. And I think related to that point is London residents. How can we be more specific here and think about whose problem we're solving for? So it could be cyclists in London who are worried about the impact on their lungs of cycling, commuting to work through the city. And even better, cyclists aged 25 to 35, because suddenly you can start thinking about what that category of people are like, the personas, as we've talked about in the past, what technology they're using, you know, what their behaviors are, and you're really bringing to life that problem. And even better, it proves that you've really done your research around this problem rather than being generic, which doesn't let you stand out. So, as I said here, the problem is very generic. A better response might be, we solve the problem of London residents who lack information about the areas of the city most affected by pollution and want to know where to avoid while traveling. Okay, question 3, and then I'm going to pause to see some of the questions coming through. So, my main customers avoid saying anyone in London, as I said before. It's just not specific enough. The best ideas solve a problem for a specific group of people. Who are your users? What are their demographics, needs, behaviors, likes, dislikes? How many of them are they? So the important thing of being able to show how big this problem is. If you're serving a few hundred people in London, it probably won't have as much potential than if you say, you know, you are addressing a problem that is impacting tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in a particular area. So the answer here, I put London residents. Too generic, better to write something like London smartphone users aged 25 to 45 who care about the environment, are concerned about their health, and are interested in using tech to track routines. Okay, I'm going to jump into the chat to have a look at some of these questions coming through. Cynthia, hello. In terms of the word limit, I think there is a tendency to want to try and fill all of the word limit. And my personal preference is to be more concise, be concise rather than arbitrarily trying to fill the whole word count. But the most important thing is to answer the question at the beginning rather than the end. Often I see people going around the houses, talking, maybe waffling a little bit about their idea, and then finally at the end they say, oh, and our idea is this app that uses this technology to solve the problem. You start with, our app uses publicly available data to help cyclists navigate safely through London. Then you can go under the hood and explain a little bit how it works, but you lose their attention if you don't immediately answer the question. Any other questions at this point before we move on to the next set of questions? Feel free to unmute if you prefer.
Hi, Ed.
Hey.
Hi. If you're doing a project about drug recovery and there's some people that would support the project, but if they wish to remain anonymous, is that good or is that not good?
In terms of kind of quote citing potential partners or sponsors for the project, I think you know you can do that in a sensitive way where you say we have already signed up two sponsors for this project, you know, who will remain anonymous, for example, or two sponsors who work in this particular industry or space. Does that help?
Thank you. Okay,
great. All right, I'm going to jump back into my slides, and in a moment we are going to have more of an open space to talk about the applications. So my unique selling point, and this is something that I get a lot of questions about. What is the USP and how do you differentiate your idea? So here you want to think again about this idea of tell me more. We live in a world that is pretty noisy, and there's a huge amount of innovation, particularly in the field of technology, happening. And it may seem like, there are no new ideas because everything has been done already. But this thing about the USP is ultimately about what differentiates you from your competition. Even if you're in a crowded market, how are you going to do what the existing incumbent people do better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently, in a way that's easier to use, easier to find? So as I said here, does it provide a service for your customers that they need but don't currently have? If it is a technology, can you protect the intellectual property? Again, in terms of IP, I would argue that in most cases, most new innovations do not have any discrete IP. Usually this comes out of stuff that might be born out of a laboratory that has had a lot of R&D spend put into it. But Airbnb, they wouldn't have had any IP when they were starting out, nor Uber. And actually there were existing businesses very similar to them, but what they did was better and more differentiated from what existed. So here, this example, I said, we hope to make London air cleaner and safer for everyone. And my points were, this is too generic. How about our technology collects pollution data from this source to give Londoners a clear picture of the parts of the city most affected by pollution? Then, as we talked about in the value proposition workshop, you end with the benefits. We are the only product on the market that does so using these benefits. And it might be, for example, tracking trip by trip the relative impact on lung health of those cyclists by taking the alternative path. It might be year on year tracking, things like expected health outcomes from that. It might be something else about the way that technology works that no one else is doing, that is bringing value to your customers, that will mean that you are differentiated. And I wanted to bring this to life a bit more by thinking about how to be innovative, which is basically what the unique selling point does. So innovative ideas are those that do something different that ultimately sets them apart from competitors and gives them greater market share. And you can innovate in lots of different ways. So from your product design, your business model, or your operating model, and probably a whole host of other ways. But to think about that, from the product side, it might be that you have a piece of technology or some artificial intelligence that you are looking to train using some data sets that you have access to because of links with your university, and that will help diagnose biopsy samples around the likelihood of different cancers metastasizing. So that is a product innovation. And that is, very commonly the place where people think about that innovation. But the business model innovation is somewhere where you can also really innovate. If we think about how Google started making money for the first time, they actually created a whole new way of making money, which is through their paid ads. And so they essentially created an auction for buying ads, which is called pay per click. So you bid on a price to get a certain space on Google, and it created a really competitive market for buying ad space on the internet, which was super innovative and helped set them apart as basically a media company. And you might also want to think about how you distribute your product. So if you are working on this bike app to make cycling more healthy by, in less polluted zones, you might think about how you distribute that app. So you say, our innovation is that we have actually built partnerships with the leading cycle retailers and the Santander cycle scheme to help use their networks to distribute our app. That is an amazing piece of innovation, because you have this huge advantage on your competitors, because it's not just you trying to sell your app, it is via their networks, which probably reaches tens, if not hundreds of millions of people in the UK and beyond. And then finally, thinking about the operating model. And this is where we are seeing a huge amount of innovation at the moment, particularly around the field of logistics. As many of you will know, Amazon actually didn't make a single dollar of profit for a long time when it was first set up, because Jeff Bezos did everything to serve the customer. The customer came first, and behind the scenes, he was building an operating model and a logistics system that made his marketplace basically the most attractive place to sell almost any product across the world. And so he was investing heavily in his operations, his distribution, his logistics, his warehousing, to make it a no-brainer that if you were a third party looking to sell your products, that you would go onto the Amazon marketplace. Just going to check in on any questions. Let's have a look. So Edward said, USP generally has 1 or 2 sentences, but 300 words are recommended. So if you think about your USP and the advice I gave earlier, you can say, our product is the only product in the market that does X, Y, Z. You immediately answer the question. But then again, it's like you lift up the hood of the car and you start elaborating. The way that works is feature X does this, and the way it protects our market share is this. Feature Y does this, Z, etc. So I hope that helps. Any other questions at this point? Arias, how do you determine a logistics entity if you want to choose this? That would be a very specific business, one where basically you are shipping stuff and distributing stuff across the country. So Ocado, Amazon, it really depends on what your business idea is. And in terms of these slides, I have made the link publicly available, so I'll drop the link in the chat shortly. Please do keep it coming with these questions so we can get the most out of this session. Right, so question 5, and this is my favorite one, because I would say that this is the one probably answered least well out of all questions. And that is, I described my idea to my grandparents as, and here what often happens is people start throwing in all of their complex jargon to describe their products, not thinking about what the question is asking, which is basically make it simple. You can also think, describe my idea to a 6-year-old child. How do you make it as simple as possible? So can you describe it to someone so someone understands and is engaged? Avoid all of that jargon and technical terminology and make it relevant to them. Bring it to life with examples, stats, compelling or attention-grabbing statements. So my example here is an artificial intelligence tool that uses blockchain, multiple APIs, and citywide metadata to track pollution in London. What do people think about that?
I think it has all the keywords.
Yeah. So I'll say it again. My idea is an artificial intelligence tool that uses blockchain, multiple APIs, and citywide metadata to track pollution in London. How would your grandparents respond to that?
My grandparents wouldn't understand more than 3 words in that sentence.
Exactly.
They would get that it's in London, but then after that, it would be, okay, so what are you doing?
Exactly. Exactly. And we have to think like this, right? The people judging your applications are very intelligent human beings, but they don't know everything. And make it easy for them. You know, when you are I found physics really hard at school, super hard. And some of my teachers, they were way too clever, and everything was mysterious to me because it was too technical. And my response as an audience member, as a student, is I was kind of peed off, I was disengaged. But in their mind, they were, describing it in the most precise technical way that they could. Whereas my favorite teacher was the one that would break down problems into analogies that I could understand. Thinking about household objects, thinking about games of football, thinking about, taking airline flights or whatever it was. And then suddenly you're kind of walking a mile in your audience's shoes, and making it more compelling. And again, I use this idea of answering the question in the compelling way. And then once you've done that, you can lift up the hood of the car and describe the V8 engine, twin carburetors, whatever. But you want to start by saying, this car is the sleekest designed and fastest car currently available on the market for less than £20,000. Super, super easy to understand. So in this case, do not be distracted putting in, words like artificial intelligence. The important thing about the technology, any technology, is what it does. So in this case, you might want to say to your grandparents, my idea is an application that is easily accessible on your smartphone, which means as a cyclist, you can find easy to use pathways through the city, which not only get you to work quicker, but they mean that with each trip, you are 20% less likely to develop lung cancer. I haven't mentioned any technology there at all. But then the next step, I can go into more detail. The way this works is I'm bringing in information from Google Maps. I'm adding a data layer on top of that with some analysis. Fine. And then finally, the technologies I use to make this happen include artificial intelligence, publicly available APIs, whatever. Does that make sense? This is a really, really important point. And scanning through your business ideas this afternoon, a lot of you just need to take that step back and think about your audience. A great way to do this is just to try it out in front of an audience. All too often we sit in our rooms and we work on stuff and we're not able to take a step back and reflect on it. So just test this out with other people and see how they respond. So Cynthia has just asked, how do you differentiate this question from the first one that asks about your idea once you have made it the initial easy to understand statement? So this question is, Felicia actually tried this out with their real life grandparents, which is great. So for those of you who came to the value proposition workshop, you might basically want to revisit that here, because when you're describing your idea to your grandparents, you pretty much want to cover off those different points that we included in that workshop. So my full answer might be something like this. To my grandparents, did you know that there are 1.3 million people regularly cycling in London, but over their lifetime, 39% of them will have negatively impacted lung health because of the routes they choose? My solution is a phone application that easily identifies the most convenient paths through the city, which gets those cyclists to where they want to go faster, cheaper, and in a way that radically positively impacts their health. We are the only app in the market that does this at a low price, etc., etc. Do you see what I mean? So you start with that why, with that, surprise me statement. Then you mention who you're working with, what your app does, or what your idea does, and the impacts it has. And for those of you asking about that value proposition workshop, all of the workshops have been recorded, and maybe Kat, while I'm chatting, you could drop in the link to the Mayor's Entrepreneur YouTube, so everyone has access to all of those previous workshops. At which point I'm gonna jump back into my slides and touch on probably the most technical of all of the questions, which is how you make money. Before addressing this question, it's really important to consider these three questions. Number one, who uses what you're doing? Number two, who pays for it? And number three, how much? And those three questions are what will inform your answer to this question. My idea will make money by. And the different revenue model ideas that you may want to use, I've listed 5 of them. I may have missed off some, but these are the 5 probably most common. First of all, B2C, or sometimes called D2C. This is selling directly to individual consumers. So someone like me selling to someone like you guys in this workshop, someone, on the street, selling to individual consumers. Then B2B is when you sell to businesses, or it could be to charities, or it could be to governments. Then B2B2C, a bit of a mouthful, is a kind of combination of those two models. But you see that quite frequently where, for example, going back to my example of the mental health with young people in the UK, I might have developed an app that is to support undergraduate students in London. But in this day and age, no one really spends money on apps. So I don't think I'm going to make any money selling apps to students who may not have, the disposable income anyway. So how might I make money? Well, I could see if I could sell that app through the health and welfare services offered by the individual universities. And that would be an example of B2B2C. So you're eventually reaching the individual consumers, but in the interim, it is the business, the organization, the charity, the university, the government that pays for that service. A really nice way for this to happen is that often you see companies driving adoption of their ideas. So again, with this app, I might actually hand this out for free to students across the UK, and then I would be able to evidence to King's, to Greenwich, to Westminster that I already had X number of thousands of students using my application, seeing real benefit in addressing their mental health through this app, which would mean they are more likely to pay for access to that app within the university setting. Next, marketplace. This is something that each of us probably interact with on a weekly, if not daily, basis. This is where you connect supply and demand, taxi drivers with people wanting lifts, people with spare rooms looking for a place to stay, people with old furniture looking to sell it to people who have just moved into a new flat, like Gumtree or Spock, and you charge a fee to connect supply and demand. So that is a marketplace. And then the last one, which is a term that you may not have come across, is what's called a platform model, where again you connect supply and demand, but a third party pays. So in the case of Google, they organize all of this information, which is supplied by websites, by blogs, by academics, by people who contribute to Wikipedia, wherever it might be, and then it's consumed by us, the people who use their search engine. But we never pay to use the search engine, and that is because they have engaged so many people, probably the majority of the world, onto their platform, that they can create value by selling ad space to third parties. So this is an increasingly kind of prevalent and common model, particularly in this age of kind of data and ad tech or advertising technology. So yeah, I'm just going to whiz through to the end of these 8 questions, and then if you have questions, I'm going to drop into the chat because yeah, this one is a little bit more technical. Number 7. So how will my idea meet the aims of the awards? Revisit the award category and look at its aims and make your whole application relevant to that aim. So making sure that you tie up your application to one of these 4 award categories. Just have a good read of all of the content on the website, and the GLA team have also put some example challenges in the different award categories to kind of give you a sense of some of the topics that they might be thinking about. Excuse me. And then lastly, thinking about social or environmental impact. So my background is in social entrepreneurship. This is an area that I really love, but it is also quite complex to prove impact. So the way that I break this down is into 2 buckets, which is outputs and outcomes. So let's say if I'm working on a youth education scheme to address people who are at risk of dropping out of school, the outputs is what happens immediately following your intervention, which might be a youth program. And the outputs are the skills learned, the behaviors practiced, the topics covered, the relationships built, etc., etc. So those are the tangible outputs. But the impact, impact, and I really want to stress this, is around outcomes, which probably are a higher level, potentially at a kind of societal or environmental level. So the longer term impact of your intervention is your outcomes. So reduced unemployment or crime levels, reduced school dropout rates, or an increase in lifetime earnings. So really tangible outcomes to measure your societal or environmental impact against. Okay, another quick pause there. Let's see, I've seen lots of hands up. Okay, my app will be used by individuals but made available through institutions. Is that a B2B? That is a B2B2C. So the distribution is through schools, but the use is by students. And this is where, if you remember on my slides, I asked these 3 questions. Oh. Wow, put them in very large font. Who uses it? So in this case, it is the students. Who pays? In your case, it is the schools. And then how much do you charge them for your service? So think about those 3 questions when looking at your revenue stream. Then Tom Phillips, has the award category changed? On the website, there is one just called technology with smart cities as part of that category. Kat, at this point, you might have to correct what my slide said. Is the smart cities category now called the technology category?
Yes, actually, I did spot that right at the beginning. But sorry, Ed. Yeah, that was it's just been renamed for this year, so smart cities is included in tech to make that a bit broader.
Great, thank you. Would it be good to overlap the awards? I'm not sure what that means. The way the awards are set up is that you apply for a specific award category, but you are allowed to apply for more than once. So you can potentially apply with the same application for 2 different categories. But
you're not allowed to do that, Ed.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No, sorry.
Yeah, you're definitely not allowed to do that.
I was not going to encourage it anyway. So thank you for pulling me up on that. Okay.
What I would say though is there's the question about the other additional societal and environmental impacts of your idea. So if you feel like you fit between 2 categories, that could well be a question you can demonstrate the sort of additional benefits of your idea you can put into your answer to that question, perhaps.
And a couple of hands up. Cynthia, did you have a question?
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
So I'm unsure. Well, not completely unsure. I have an idea of which category we could fit into, but I'm not 100% sure. So I wanted to kind of just share the idea and see where you think we'd fit. So obviously in the UK alone, there are 4.7 million people currently living with diabetes, and this number is increasing. And everything in the supermarket has sugar in it. And so we wanted to create, or we have created, an ice cream that has 0 added sugar. But what's good about it is that it is the first ice cream in the UK that it has a holistic approach to sustainability. So we are looking for it to be packaged in 100% recyclable material, which is glass tubs. And we will be utilizing the circular economy model. So really looking to how we could get the customers to actually bring back their packaging, or really using branding and marketing to encourage customers to upcycle. We really want to try and get customers to stop using plastic packaging or plastic containers to store their foods at home, and use our packaging to kind of store anything like their cereal or cookies or whatever to fit in it. So we are holistically sustainable because I have a background in sustainability, and the person who I'm doing this with has a background in, she's a physio and she did her dissertation in diabetes and so on and so forth. So there's a real mesh between health and the environment, and they're both equally important.
That makes sense. I would say sustainability is a byproduct of the product that you're offering. And I would argue that it is the health impact of creating, tasty treats for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to have those as readily as others. I would say that is something that directly addresses diabetes, and the fact that the knock-on effect is that you do that in a sustainable way. That's, I feel, secondary to the principal purpose of your business.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Okay, so in a moment, we're going to have a short break, but just beforehand, I am going to look at some of these questions. In the advice for applicants document, there is a mention of a supporting statement. Jill Murray, there is a place at the bottom of the second page on the application form where you can attach supporting documents. So hopefully that answers that question. Then Ryan has got a question.
Hi, Ed. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Hi there. Yeah. So my question is that, and I'm sorry if you have covered this already. I've just joined. I just came from a meeting. In the application, what should you usually include in terms of the balance between vision and what you're currently focusing on now? So my background is in AI research, and I want to include this technology in the midterm/long-term future. But at the moment, our MVP does not include that at all. So in the application, because I'm going for the tech award, if that's still a thing, how much should I balance between the vision and the MVP currently? Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a great question, and so Ryan, you weren't here at the start when I opened with this statement about tell me more, about how the best applications think about how to engender this response in their audience, where they say, tell me more. And one of the points I talked about was the sense that your idea is achievable. And so a great way to do that is you sell the vision of where you want to get to, and then articulate the steps that you will take to get there. So our vision is to transform the health of cyclists navigating through London through an application that creates safe routes for commuting cyclists in London. We have a 3-phase process to get there. Number 1, our initial MVP or prototype, released in July 2021, will do this. Phase 2 will raise funding and we will build it into a fully fledged product that does this. In phase 3, in 5 years' time, we would look to build in a piece of hardware or whatever it is, right? And then suddenly you have talked through this kind of logical process for achieving your vision. So that's how I'd address that. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And okay. Then Hi Nakada, should we also consider the budgetary aspects in detail, such as keeping costs down? What should I look out for? So it's a good question. Every business needs to think about your expenses to become sustainable. At this stage, it is not the primary goal. At this stage, you want to be building a vision for something that addresses a massive problem in a suitable way. The costs that sit behind that is further down the line. But yeah, that first thing of creating a solution to a really pressing problem is the key part of this application. And actually, there's no question about cost structures. Arguably, I mean, if you wanted to attach some supporting documentation about your cost structures, we did cover it in the business model canvas, where if you think about your revenue model, you might also have thought about some of the costs associated with selling your product, but it's definitely not a high priority at this stage. Okay, one last question and then we'll take a quick tea break. So Andrea, I have an idea for a game or app for young people that will make them interact with museums in London. It's making museums more attractive for young audiences. I would say this is squarely in creative industries because this is bringing to life arts and culture for a younger audience. And you said, is this B2B to C? Museums might pay for some of the ads in the apps. I will not tell you what your revenue model is because that is something for you to explore. If you think about that space, there are tons of apps in kind of education technology, which is the space in which I work, where it is the parents of the children who pay. So one of them that you might want to look at is called Night Zookeeper. There we go. And you know, they pay a subscription for that app. But you know, in your case, because the museums are helping to distribute the app, maybe they would pay. But it is for you to do that research to figure that out. Because I'm not the expert on the museum side. So it could be a B2C, and the parents pay for their children to use the app. It could be a B2B2C via museums or the sponsors of the museums or the corporates who sit behind the museums, whatever it might be. Right, okay, I am going to pause there and we are gonna reconvene at 8 minutes past 5 for part 2, and I'm going to talk through a few more case studies of good practice, continue answering questions, and then we are going to hear from our fantastic winners from last year. All right, thanks a lot everyone, see you in a minute. Any questions at this point? Someone has asked for my email. I will share my LinkedIn later on this afternoon. Felicia has said, would you recommend actually using bullet points in your answers? This is very much a personal preference thing, but honestly, having reviewed so many of these over the years, the ones with bullet points are easier to read, even if it, you know, doesn't look like beautiful prose. It does really, really help. And even if you don't want to use them in your application, write out your application as if using bullet points, and then it naturally means that you will cut out some of the kind of filler words that just create noise around your applications. Okay, so we have just over 10 minutes before our fantastic speakers are going to join us. So I just wanted to end with a few of the top tips that we've talked about this afternoon. So number one, to immediately answer the question. And that is your first line. Concise, clear, immediately address what the question is asking from you. Don't wait till the end. Start with that answer. Second, draft your responses offline. Use some of the tips we've been talking about, structure it using bullet points, start with why, then, you know, a quick, concise description of your idea, then lift up the hood of the car, go into a bit more detail, talk about how it works, talk about what technology you use, and then end with a vision of what's possible. So as you saw in the last example, I ended with, we believe we will radically improve health outcomes of those impacted by concussion in sport. So you end it with something that's really inspiring. Next, to test out your application answers with people who don't know about your idea. I was kind of trying to give an example of that this afternoon because I was just very quickly looking at some of your answers to this, and I wanted to show how some of them were a little bit confusing. And that is why I actively read them out aloud, because you will have seen, I mean, it's quite late in the day after a long day, but I was kind of tripping over some of the words, and that's because they were quite hard to read. And so read them out to friends, make sure your sentence structure and your language is smooth, and that will help with the clarity of your ideas. Then lastly, use evidence. So as I talked about in one of the examples around physiotherapy, if you bring in those stats, it just gives you that edge, that element of authority, and proves that you've really done your work and research. So to help you guys with this whole process, the lovely GLA team have actually put together a whole bunch of FAQs for any other questions that you might have. Whoa, every time I paste stuff, it goes into massive font. Sorry about that. But that is now in the chat. And I have also added or created a step-by-step guide to applications for each of you, which is here. So in that link that I just posted, I've actually used kind of annotated case studies of real life applications from the past, and given my kind of comments and feedback on their kind of relative strengths and weaknesses. And this is timely because it's just something someone has asked about mentorship. This Calendly link here is for some mentorship sessions. So a lot of you have been having sessions with Mark over the last couple of months, getting idea feedback from him. I think about 70 of you have had sessions with him, which is great. There should be some sessions available on that link. I actually haven't checked it recently. If there aren't any on there, just this evening, I'm going to extend. Oh, okay, there are none. I'm going to extend the date range because I think we stopped it maybe at the end of March or something, but I'm going to open up a few more sessions. And the way those sessions work is that it's group based. So because there's a lot of you to get through, there might be 5 or 6 of you in the group, and a lot of the similar questions will come up, but it means, you know, we can run through some of your ideas, we can think about how to better structure your answers, and just get kind of some peer feedback as well about how to give your application the best possible chance. What else? Oh yeah, so just lastly, some key takeaways. Think about this kind of framing statement. Tell me more. Is what you are saying compelling, exciting, surprising, easy to understand, inspiring? Start with why, and then how, then what. Start with that big hook statement that leads me into your story, that opens the door for me to want to know more about what you're doing. Clarity beats complexity. Do your friends understand it? Use evidence, and then draft, and draft again. Testing all the time with friends, family, whoever you can borrow to get feedback on your idea. Okay. Kat, do we have our first speaker?
Hi, yes, Nina and Ur are both here.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Oh, great to have you guys on the call. So who should we start with? Well, the first person I had on my slide was Nina Rimsky, who's the founder of Toilets for London. Ah, I can see you now, Nina. Hey, thanks so much.
Hi.
Cool. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in London actually. So yeah, going with the theme so far.
Nice. Okay, well, do you want to just talk a little about your journey with Toilets for London, where the idea came from, and then how it kind of developed over the course of the MES Entrepreneur Program.
Yeah, definitely. So I came into the MES Entrepreneur with just an idea. Don't know whether I should kind of say this to you all or not. Maybe some of you already heard it. I think I spoke at a previous kind of event, the MES Entrepreneur, but I made up the idea kind of while I was filling in the application form. So it was just an idea. I had nothing other than the fact that the issue, which is access to toilets, is something that's bugged me for a long time and has been, something that I've thought about a lot. But I hadn't thought about it from the point of view of I want to build a solution. I thought about it from the point of view of I want to get other people to do something about toilets. So up till that point, I'd been, trying to get in contact with local authorities and being like, hey, people are struggling to access toilets during lockdown, a lot of disabled people having issues, and all kinds of, people from lots of different backgrounds really struggle, and the quality of their life suffers from not being able to easily access a toilet out and about. So, I was approaching the problem from the point of view of trying to get somebody else to do something. And the MES Entrepreneur competition was just brought to my awareness by some people at uni. And it just made me think, actually, why don't I think of something to, solve that problem, or at least, work towards solving the problem of access to toilets in London, and then, hopefully outside of London too. And so I was sitting down in the evening and I looked at the application form and I was like, what can I think of that could solve this problem? And I sort of came up with the idea that I've kind of then developed through the competition and built now, which is an app and a data management platform that enables councils and local authorities and parks and anyone who's responsible for publicly accessible toilets to have a kind of two-way communication with people who are going to use those toilets. So instead of being just like a map that helps you find toilets, it's actually a platform that obviously helps you find toilets on a easy to use map-based app, but also allows you to give feedback to people who manage toilets and allows people who manage toilets to share that data effectively with people, the general public, hopefully to make it kind of enable groups that manage toilets to work together more effectively and provide better services. So at the beginning, it was just an idea. I tried to kind of follow the best principles of kind of wording that idea. But I'm sure you kind of got a lot of good tips today. It sounded like a lot of that advice is very pertinent to filling in these types of applications. So that's sort of what I tried to do. And then as the competition progressed, we received kind of all of these training sessions, which hopefully you all are going to have, which really helped me think more deeply about how to present the idea and also how to, actually develop the idea. So as I went through the competition, I ended up, kind of producing a few designs and stuff, but I didn't actually build anything until I won. And then after I won the competition, I then started to actually, code the app. So I coded the app myself, and I had to learn quite a lot to do that, which I didn't necessarily know while I was doing the competition. I guess, I'm saying that kind of for any of you who are doing the tech award or wanting to have a tech-based product and are a bit concerned about how am I going to build this? Am I going to be able to build this? Don't let that hold you back from this competition. Obviously, it's quite open to early stage ideas, which is great, which means that even if you're not sort of, you don't actually have a product yet, as long as you can convincingly show that you are able to bring that product to life, that's okay. And I think that was kind of one of the great things about the competition was how open it was to any stage of entrepreneur.
Thank you so much. What an amazing story. I kind of took a few things from that. The first is for those of you today who, just are still at idea stage, Nina's story shows you that you still, can go really far in this competition just at that idea stage. The second is about kind of building tech, and it's just to kind of point towards the next workshop, which is around MVP, and we're actually going to be looking at some tools to create some no-code apps. So even if you are not a developer, I am not a developer, you can actually build fully functioning apps in, I built a really crappy one in about 45 minutes. but you can build some quite interesting stuff quite quickly without using any code. So hopefully that will help you think about what you might be able to achieve before bringing in developers and technical co-founders. And then the third thing is about your model and how you weren't just addressing the users of public facilities and toilets, but also those who are managing, you know, whether it's facilities management or councils. And so you kind of have multiple user groups and multiple kind of sets of benefits to those different user groups. So really super interesting. What is your advice for these guys on the call today around the application?
I think something that's very important is to kind of show that you're the right person to bring the idea to life, because a lot of ideas are not necessarily, I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs like to think that their idea is one of a kind and super unique, but most likely it may be a bit unique, but ultimately good ideas have often been done before, or at least, a popular problem space is usually, has already been explored quite a lot. And so a lot of the time your USP is not really your idea in and of itself. It might be, but it's often not. And your USP really is you as an entrepreneur and what you can bring and the way you're going to bring it to life and how you're going to actually execute the idea. And I think obviously when you do the pitch videos, that's easier to put across as opposed to in the application form. But I still think it's a good thing to highlight. And for example, if you have any particular expertise in the area that you are kind of producing a product related to, I mean, I actually didn't, so I'm not a toilet expert. But if you do have any expertise in the area, I think that's super useful to kind of express in your application and just generally show that you're passionate about that problem and about solving it. I think that's what definitely helped me succeed in the competition is, I was genuinely really passionate about solving the problem. And to answer some of the questions in the chat about my business model, that definitely is not my strong suit. So the business model is a bit iffy at the moment. Toilets in London is a non-profit. The company is actually called Open Urban, but the company and the product is a non-profit. There are a few business models that I'm exploring at the moment about how to make it sustainable. But seeing as sort of the development of the app has been super low cost, as I've just done it all myself. So it's sort of currently the situation is basically not much coming in, not much going out. But hopefully, there are things to explore, but I can't share a lot of insight on business model wise at the moment. But yeah, obviously, if you have a great business model, that's big thumbs up, and you should include that in your application. I didn't.
Awesome. And it seems like someone has even downloaded your app and has been using it. So there we go.
Yeah, great. Any feedback on the app is always welcome. And yeah, I mean, I love hearing people's opinion on the app. And if you have any questions about app development, I don't really know a lot about no-code development, but I do recommend it. I've heard good things about it. And a lot of a lot of people that I know have tried building apps with no-code tools, and quite a lot of them had success. So I have nothing against them at all, but just personally, someone was saying something. Anyway, just personally, I quite enjoy coding, and I enjoyed that journey, and I had experience a bit in it before, so that's the way I went. So if you have any questions about sort of Swift and Kotlin, feel free to ask.
Nina, thank you so much. I think the way we're going to do this is, are you sticking around for another few minutes? Because I thought we could go.
By the way, about the programming questions, I didn't mean ask them now. I meant like ask them after the session, online, just in case that wasn't clear.
Thanks so much, Nina. We're going to jump over to Ugo, who, yeah, you can hear me. I don't know whether you're plugging in your headphones to hear a little bit about your story, and then we can kind of open it up almost to a panel for questions to the two of you. Ugo, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you. Would you also like to share a little bit about your journey of developing your amazing idea in prosthetics and how it developed through the MES Entrepreneur Program?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ed. It's my pleasure. Well, my journey was a bit surprising for MES Entrepreneur because a year ago, one of my colleagues, George, had applied to MES Entrepreneur, and I I knew the competition for 2 years before I applied. But because of the name it bears, like Mayor's Entrepreneur, Mayor of London, I was just overwhelmed with the competition itself. So last year during the lockdown, I was writing for a $500,000 Innovate UK grant, and also we had a European grant by EIT, and there will be some extra 100K coming. So we had such a big amount of money expectations coming in, and I saw the deadline, I think on LinkedIn or somewhere. I saw the deadline and I was like, okay, on top of everything I'm writing, should I really allocate extra time to write this? What are the chances I can actually win it or not? So I was a bit hopeless, to be honest, because of the competition and like London-wide and everything else. So I decided to spend time and write a good application. In the end, both of those big applications got delayed. Eventually, we got the $500,000 one, but Mayor's Entrepreneur was the first award we won after lots of applications. So it was really not the initial idea we had in mind. So it was like a surprise, and it boosted the whole team's spirit and the motivation after a very hard lockdown period. So it was definitely a very good surprise. Story-wise, I entered the competition with Unhinder, which is my startup. My name is Uğur, which means good luck in Turkish. I'm a PhD researcher and the CEO of Unhinder. And Unhinder is a wearables robotics startup. So here is the basic fact and why we do it. So in a day, we shrink 1.5 centimeters compared to morning than evening. So in the evenings, we are shorter than mornings, and our feet and hands are larger in the evenings. We don't notice these changes because we wear flexible clothes throughout the day, which is just logical. However, if you lose a leg, you are given a variable prosthetic limb that is not flexible. So that adaptive, flexible logic should apply there, but unfortunately it doesn't. And this is where we were developing a technology, a variable sleeve worn on the residual limb. And depending on the person's shape changes throughout the day, volume changes throughout the day, the sleeve is adjusting itself automatically. And amputees can enter adjustments via their mobile phones, and this is then learned by AI to be done automatically. Because at the moment, these adjustments have to be done via clinical appointments, which is time-consuming, very expensive, and frustrating. And when the wounds appear, they cause skin breaks. So once the skin starts getting blisters, it causes infections and things. So we wanted to reduce the dependency on the healthcare system and give amputees more control on their fitting. So that's the start of the idea. And at the time when we were applying to Mayor's Entrepreneur, we were fairly towards the end of early stage. We had filed 4 patents so far, entering the national phase. At that time, we had raised around £1 million in grant funding. We had a team, not for the startup, but in total, we had 19 people working on the project from the grants. So it was growing, but the actual startup was like the business model wise had to be developed even further, and that's where Mayor of London came in, because central to our business model is clinical trials. And with those grants, we were allowed to do certain things, and some of the expenses we weren't allowed to spend because it wasn't in the scope of the grant. So Mayor's Entrepreneur helped us to actually spend that money into development of the clinical trials and also legal expenses, small bits and pieces, because those small bits and pieces add up, accumulate, and become quite big expenses in the end. And this was kind of like a saver, rescue money for us, and it was a very generous money.
Amazing. I the first thing that struck me by how you told your story, and thank you, Ugo, conveniently ties in with what I've been banging on about for the last 2 hours, is that you did not tell us what you did immediately. You said why the problem was significant. Nice takeaway for everyone on this call. Now, Ugo, thinking back to kind of this time last year, what really helped? What do you think really helped your application to stand out?
Well, definitely the sessions with Mark at that time, who was as brilliant as you are with the tips. And I was just, when I joined, I was looking at the tips that you were giving. So those tips really helped me. But also the friendly attitude, like Gillian and Kath. So that initial overwhelmed idea of mayor's entrepreneur faded away because of the warmth of people and the accessibility. So I just thought, okay, the people who are going to judge are also human beings. If they are given a logical story, why they wouldn't accept it? Because they're not my enemies. They just want to make a difference for London as well as for the global well-being. So these sessions helped me to start thinking more positively, which boosted my confidence to write the application in a better way. Because if I would give three pieces of advice, one of them is, the first one is, when you write an application, own the application. Just write it brave, because you are the person who knows about the problem. You are the person who suggests the solution. There is no one who will know what you're suggesting better than you do. So you are in an advantageous place. Use that advantage and make your sentences in a way that they sound confident when someone reads. So if you don't know something for sure, just don't use it. But if you know that it is achievable, but you don't have it yet, then mention its potential. So you may not have the things today because you're just maybe starting, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have them at all. So start thinking about the bigger picture. If you get this, if you have the money, if you have the team, what is the difference you're going to make? And be brave in that difference. And the other part is, whatever the problem you're solving, it could be related to, for example, I will speak for the health award. It could be related to women's health, but there will be also male judges. But male judges will also have wives or daughters or like close friends. So you have to explain the situation, whatever it is, or vice versa, a men's health related thing. You have to explain the situation that relates to people. In my case, I'm explaining something about limb loss to people, and there were no amputees in the audience or in the judging panel. So it's very unlikely that a person without limb loss would actually know what a limb loss means or how it affects someone's life. So be relatable. I use the language directly speaking, like, if you lose the leg and if you ever want to walk again, this is what you have to wear. This is the prosthetic system you have to wear. Because people will empathize themselves in the situation. They will picture themselves, imagine themselves, and if you're following a good storyline, they will picture themselves and they're going to say, yes, this is actually very bad to be in this situation. And for Health Award especially, I can say, make your story relatable. And the other part is state the obvious. So you know all the facts because you've done your search, you came up with the idea and everything. Don't expect when people read, even if they're very good readers, don't expect that people are going to read between the lines, because you are going to be one of hundreds of applications. Human brain gets tired. Human brain gets distracted. So if you're going to rely a winning line, but that is between the lines, that can be just escape from attention. So state the obvious, and make sure it pops up. And when you're stating the obvious, make sure, as you were just saying in the beginning when I joined, use numbers. Is it going to be faster? Is it going to be cheaper? If so, how much faster that you are expecting, or how much cheaper it can be? And what is the performance increase? Is it 20%, 30%? Numbers are always good for people to understand something's impact. And make a storyline. Put those numbers in a storyline, because from the baby age, we are grown up with stories. Human brain is so good at reading stories, following stories. So if you make a flowing story, starting from the beginning and explain everything, once everything is finished, if you can explain what is the problem, why it is a problem, what is its impact, and how you are, what is its size or prevalence, and then how you can solve it, and if you solve it, how it's going to change. But follow, and this is pretty much your slides, basically, the way they follow it. And then make sure you ask someone else who doesn't know your idea, read it, because you will be blinded to the things that you write, because you already have that information in your brain. You will complete that sentence with the information in your head, but when you send the application, that information in your head will not be presented to the judge. So they will miss that information, and some things may not make sense. So just give it to someone when you finish, a friend or someone who doesn't know your idea well, and ask them, like, did you understand? What is it? Ask them to summarize it back. If they cannot summarize in the first time, that means the application is not actually that well written, or that's not coherent.
Ugo, thanks so much for this advice. I think it's fascinating to think about this thing of we kind of complete our own ideas in our mind and fill in the blanks, but audiences are not able to do that. So I think that idea of getting friends or peers to almost pitch you back the idea you've just shared with them is a really interesting one. And then the other, I just wanted to comment on this thing about the empathy, judges' empathy. So in my experience of reviewing business plans for the accelerators, at some points, I just did not get ideas because it was my lived experience. And however open-minded, educated, thoughtful we might be as human beings, we have blind spots. We have cognitive biases, which are only addressed when you turn to others, number one, or when the person explaining that idea lets you in to that journey. And so that's brilliant advice, to really think about how to let in the judges, and so they really get it, because actually, most likely what you are pitching to them will be different to their lived experience. So you need to use powerful storytelling and create that sense of empathy and really convey why the problem you're solving is so significant.
I think central to everything, or in the essence of everything, I'm a trained public speaker, and I'm so interested in anthropology and neuroscience. Humans are emotional animals. Every decision we make in our daily life has either conscious or subconscious emotional reasoning behind it. In this case, we are going to talk about conscious logical thinking, but still, because in the essence we are emotional animals, if we feel an emotional connection to something, it is more likely that we can be related to it, or we can be convinced by it. So communication is a tool to pass, an effective communication is a tool to pass emotions. This, when I say emotions, I don't mean dramatization of the things or make it sound like it's very sad or terrible. It is just, if it is an exciting idea, it needs to create that excitement. If it is an upsetting idea, it really needs to feel that that feeling. If it is a very shameful, like it's something that really affects your as a patient, your dignity, your privacy, for example, and puts you in a very difficult place, they should also feel that, for example, or for example, in Nina's case, we've all been in London and just really desperate to go to toilet and cannot find toilet, for example. And this is just human beings. And if that's a desperate situation, make sure the other person, when they read, understands it and just recreates the story in their head. And that's how you can create a convincing application.
Ugo and Nina, thank you both so much for your time. We are now coming up for 6:05. Perhaps if there's one last question, if anyone has any final questions for our guests today before we finish.
I've got one, but I'm also happy if anyone else has one as well.
I think it might be just you actually, Tom, so go ahead.
I was just wondering quickly, it's more relevant to Ugo, because I think Nina's idea was quite obviously to do with London, but your idea, Ugo, I was wondering how you related it to London, what your specific take on in that part of the application process was, because it seems more like a general idea that you could have, you know, it applies to everyone and every amputee in the world. So.
The part that was tangent to London is that we are going to run the clinical trial in London at Charing Cross Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in London, and which is one of the largest prosthetic clinics in London. Obviously, when you talk about health issues, and this goes to all health award applicants, it concerns Londoners, but it also concerns everybody else. So when you need to relate it to Londoners, you can give facts like if you know a percentage of the population being affected from that condition, for example, you can convert it. What's that percentage means for London's population, for example?
Gotcha.
You can give that kind of fact. There is nothing you can do about specifically for London. If it's a disease for human beings are everywhere. And in the end, actually, as a London-based business, if you can make it success, it's going to be London's pride. That London is going to be the home of that business. So you can make it relatable about how it's going to improve London hospitals, for example, or Londoners' lives in that case. When I was specifically thinking about it, I was like, okay, the environmental projects are very lucky because London is already suffering with the air quality and things, so they can easily relate how I'm going to relate amputation to like London. But there was also a part, London is, you know, it's a city for cyclists, and there are a lot of cycling accidents happening in London, and there are lots of Londoners losing their limbs because of traffic accidents and things. So that was also another aspect that I could relate.
That's super helpful. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, and those on the call, maybe you can drop your thanks in the chat as well to show your appreciation for being here this afternoon. I know, having been in this situation myself, it is so helpful to meet other people who have been in that position and help, you know, demystify what it means to be successful in a process like this. Okay, so at this point, we are just about to wrap up. I have seen a vast number of you booking feedback slots via my Calendly, which is great. I've also posted my LinkedIn if you want to connect. The mentorship slot is further up on the chat. I will post it one more time if any of you have missed it, if I can find it. And where is it? Yeah, otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to stay on the chat for another 5 minutes in case anyone's got any other questions. But otherwise, see you at mentorship. And if not, all the best with your applications. I'm sure you guys are going to impress a lot of people on the 18th of April. Cheers, guys. Catch you soon.
Yeah. I'm wishing all of you best of luck. Bye-bye.